Hi, I'm Rashonda Kate. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading The House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. We are on chapter 4, Down the River. I don't know that we'll get through this whole chapter because these pages are big. Like, this is a big book, and I get caught up. Anyway, let's get started. Neither mother nor daughter slept a great deal during the night of Warwick's first visit. Miss Molly anointed her sacrifice with tears and cried herself to sleep. Rena's emotions were more conflicting. She was sorry to leave her mother, but glad to go with her brother. The mere journey she was about to make was a great event for the two women to contemplate, to say nothing of the golden vision that lay beyond, for neither of them had ever been out of the town or its vicinity. The next day was devoted to preparations for the journey. Rena's slender wardrobe was made ready and packed in a large valise. Towards sunset, Miss Molly took off her apron, put on her slat bonnet, she was ever the pink of neatness, picked her way across the street, which was muddy from a rain during the day, traversed the footbridge that spanned the ditch in front of the cooper shop, and spoke first to the elder of the two men working there. "Good evening, Peter." "Good evening, ma'am," responded the man briefly, but not relaxing at all the energy with which he was trimming a barrel stave. Miss Molly then accosted the younger workman, a dark brown young man, small in stature, but with a well-shaped head. It's good to know he has a well-shaped head. But with a well-shaped head, an expressive forehead, and features indicative of kindness, intelligence, humor, and imagination. Ooh, we've got like some physiognomy happening here. "Frank," she asked, "can I get you to do something for me soon in the morning?" "Yes'm, I reckon so," replied the young man, resting his hatchet on the chopping block. "What is it, Miss Molly?" "My daughter's going away on the boat, and I 'lowed you wouldn't mind toting her carpet bag down to the wharf, unless you'd rather haul it down on your cart. It ain't very heavy. Of course I'll pay you for your trouble." "Thank you, ma'am," he replied. He knew that she would not pay him, for the simple reason that he would not accept pay for such a service. "Is she going far?" he asked with a sorrowful look which he could not entirely disguise. Ooh, a potential love interest for Rena? Perhaps that is why he was so interested in the stranger that was visiting the house. "As far as Wilmington and beyond. She'll be visiting her brother John, who lives in another state, and wants her to come and see him." "Yes'm, I'll come. I won't need to cart. I'll tote the bag. But what time shall I come over?" "Well, long about 7 o'clock or half past. She's going on the Old North State, and it leaves at 8. Frank stood looking after Miss Molly as she picked her way across the street until he was recalled to his duty by a sharp word from his father. "Tend to your work, boy, tend to your work. You're wasting your time, wasting your time." Aw, that's so sad. Yes, he was wasting his time. The beautiful young girl across the street could never be anything to him, but he had saved her life once. Okay, let's tuck that away, but he had saved her life once, and had dreamed that he might render her again some signal service that might win her friendship and convince her of his humble devotion. For Frank was not proud. You know the song, "I Ain't Too Proud to Beg"? That's in mind right now. A smile, which Peter would have regarded as condescending to a free man who, since the war, was as good as anybody else, a kind word, which Peter would have considered offensively patronizing, a piece of Miss Molly's famous potato pone from Rena's hands, a bone to a dog, Peter called it once, were ample rewards for the 1,001 small services Frank had rendered the two women who lived in the house behind the Cedars. "Oh, he's been pining away for a long time." Frank went over in the morning a little ahead of the appointed time and waited on the back piazza until his services were required. "You ain't going to be gone long, is you, Miss Rena?" he inquired, when Rena came out dressed for the journey in her best frock and broad white collar and cuffs. Rena did not know. She had been asking herself the same question. All sorts of vague dreams had floated through her mind during the last few hours as to what the future might bring forth, but she detected the anxious note in Frank's voice and had no wish to give this faithful friend of the family unnecessary pain. "Oh no, Frank, I reckon not. I'm supposed to just be going on a short visit. My brother has lost his wife and wishes me to come and stay with him a while and look after his little boy." I'm feared you'll like it better there, Miss Rena, replied Frank sorrowfully, dropping his mask of unconcern. And then you won't come back, and none of your friends won't never see you no more. You don't think, Frank, asked Rena severely, that I would leave my mother and my home and all my friends and never come back again? Why, no, indeed, interposed Miss Molly wistfully as she hovered around her daughter, giving her hair or her gown a touch here and there. She'll be so homesick in a month that she'll be willing to walk home. You wouldn't never have to do that, Miss Rena, returned Frank with a disconsolate smile. If you ever want to come home and can't get back no other way, just let me know, and I'll take my mule and my cart and fetch you back if it's from the end of the world. That's so sweet. Typically, I'm like cautious of those kinds of things, but oh, it's so sweet. Thank you, Frank. I believe you would, said the girl kindly. You're a true friend, Frank, and I'll not forget you while I'm gone. The idea of her beautiful daughter riding home from the end of the world with Frank in a cart behind a one-eyed mule struck Miss Molly as the height of the ridiculous. She was in a state of excitement where tears or laughter would have come with equal ease, and she turned away to hide her merriment. I know that feeling. I'm sure you do too. You're in your feelings, you're stressed, you're just heightened emotionally, and anything will set you off. It can make you crack up inappropriately, or it can make you cry. So here we have Miss Molly just cracking up at the visualization of her daughter coming home from the ends of the world with Frank behind a one-eyed mule. I feel her. I like how real they seem right here. Her daughter was going to live in a fine house and marry a rich man and ride in her carriage. Of course, a Negro would drive the carriage, but that was different from riding with one in a cart. When it was time to go, Miss Molly and Rena set out on foot for the river, which was only a short distance away. Frank followed with the valise. There was no gathering of friends to see Rena off, as might have been the case under different circumstances. Her departure had some of the characteristics of a secret flight. It was as important that her destination should not be known as it had been that her brother should conceal his presence in the town. Miss Molly and Rena remained on the bank until the steamer announced with a raucous whistle its readiness to depart. Warwick was seen for a moment on the upper deck, from which he greeted them with a smile and a slight nod. He had bidden his mother an affectionate farewell the evening before. Rena gave her hand to Frank. Goodbye, Frank, she said with a kind smile. I hope you and Mama will be good friends while I'm gone. The whistle blew a second warning blast, and the deckhands prepared to draw on the gangplank. Rena flew into her mother's arms, and then, breaking away, hurried on board and retired to her stateroom, from which she did not emerge during the journey. The window blinds were closed, darkening the room, and the stewardess who came to ask if she should bring her some dinner could not see her face distinctly, but perceived enough to make her surmise that the young lady had been weeping. Po child, murmured the sympathetic colored woman. I reckon some of her folks is dead, or her sweetheart's gone back on her, or else she's had some kin or bad luck or nother. White folks has their troubles just as well as black folks, and sometimes feels 'em mo, 'cause they ain't used to 'em. All right, so passing is already working splendidly for Rena. The stewardess who came to see if she wanted some dinner, who was a colored woman, assumed she was white and said white folks have their troubles just like everybody else, and sometimes they feel them more because they're not used to them. Intriguing. Miss Molly went back in sadness to the lonely house behind the cedars, henceforth to be peopled for her with only the memory of those she had loved. She had paid with her heart's blood another installment on the Shylock's bond exacted by society for her own unhappiness of the past and her children's prospects for the future. Okay, so this was published in 1900, and the reference to Shylock is a cruel one, actually. It references Jewish people who are like accountants or lenders, and who do so with usury. It's always interesting to see what we read and what would have been acceptable in a different time. Clearly, a lot of the language used in this book and the others that I've read is language that is not acceptable today, but was back in the time. And that's really important to keep the context in mind. All right, I'll keep reading. The journey down the sluggish river to the seaboard in the flat-bottomed stern-wheel steamer lasted all day and most of the night. During the first half day, the boat grounded now and then upon a sandbank, and the half-naked Negro deckhands toiled with ropes and poles to release it. Several times before Rena fell asleep that night, the steamer would tie up at a landing, and by the light of huge pine torches, she watched the boat hands send the yellow turpentine barrels down the steep bank in a long string or pass cordwood on board from hand to hand. The excited Negroes, their white teeth and eyeballs glistening in the surrounding darkness, to which their faces formed no relief. Okay, so you get that kind of imagery a lot of a super dark black person who you can't tell from night except for their eyes and their teeth. Ting! All right, so we're getting offended in lots of ways here. But I also think that the language that Chesnutt is using is to help us disassociate Rena from being black. Because really, we have some stereotype stuff, I'm not gonna lie. But like the Shylock reference and describing the half-naked Negro deckhands, and they're so dark you can't see their faces except for their eyes and their teeth. I think this language, and we had yellow turpentine barrels, like we're getting a lot of like color and insinuations here, and I think it's really just to help us as readers disassociate Rena from blackness. And I think it's also showing Rena disassociating from blackness. Now, I could be all wrong. Let's keep reading and see what happens. All right, the excited Negroes, their white teeth and eyeballs glistening in the surrounding darkness, to which their faces formed no relief, the white officers in brown linen, shouting, swearing, and gesticulating, the yellow flickering torchlight overall, made up a scene of which the weird interest would have appealed to a more blasé traveler than this girl upon her first journey. Like, we just had so much color there. Half-naked Negroes, pine, torches. I mean, the torches aren't green, but pine elicits green. Yellow turpentine, white teeth, white eyeballs, surrounding darkness, white officers in brown linen, yellow flickering torchlight. All right. It's interesting. Like, this is what I do when I read. I stop and I ponder. So thanks for being along for the ride. All right, let's keep going. During the day, Warwick had taken his meals in the dining room with the captain and the other cabin passengers. It was learned that he was a South Carolina lawyer and not a carpetbagger. Such credentials were unimpeachable, and the passengers found him a very agreeable traveling companion. Apparently sound on the subject of Negroes, Yankees, and the righteousness of the lost cause. Aw, the righteousness of the lost cause. He has to pretend he believed in the cause of the Confederacy? That's got to be rough. And what does it say about him as a person? All right. He yet discussed these themes in a lofty and impersonal manner that gave his words greater weight than if he had seemed warped by a personal grievance. His attitude, in fact, piqued the curiosity of one or two of the passengers. "Did your people lose any niggers?" asked one of them. "My father owned 100, he replied grandly. Their respect for his views was doubled. It was easy to moralize about the misfortunes of others and to find good in the evil that they suffer. Only a true philosopher could speak thus lightly of his own losses." Little do they know. How much do we have left? Oh my gosh, we're going to finish this. Okay. When the steamer tied up at the wharf at Wilmington in the early morning, the young lawyer and a veiled lady, oh, she has on a veil covering her features. The young lawyer and a veiled lady passenger drove in the same carriage to a hotel. After they had breakfasted in a private room, Warwick explained to his sister the plan he had formed for her future. Henceforth, she must be known as Miss Warwick, dropping the old name with the old life. He would place her for a year in a boarding school at Charleston, after which she would take her place as the mistress of his house. Having imparted this information, he took his sister for a drive through the town. Okay, why does she have no say in how her life is going to unfold? And why did I not realize until just now that Warwick was his last name and not his first? Okay, so I was slow on that. But he's like, here's how I have totally planned out your whole new life for you. You're welcome. All right. He would place her for a year in a boarding school at Charleston, after which she would take her place as the mistress of his house. Having imparted this information, he took his sister for a drive through the town. There, for the first time, Rena saw great ships, which her brother told her sailed across the mighty ocean to distant lands, whose flags he pointed out drooping lazily at the mastheads. The business portion of the town had an ancient and fish-like smell, and most of the trade seemed to be in cotton and naval stores and products of the sea. The wharves were piled high with cotton bales, and there were acres of barrels of resin and pitch and tar and spirits of turpentine. All of this reading about turpentine really reminds me of The Rise of Silas Lapham. Who wrote that? Was it William Dean Howells? I think it was William Dean Howells. I really liked that book, The Rise of Silas Lapham, but it was about the rise and fall of a new money paint mogul in the 19th century, and turpentine was the thing. Anyway, I'm going to finish reading this. We are almost at the end of this chapter. Okay, the market, a long, low wooden structure in the middle of the principal street, was filled with a mass of people of all shades, from blue-black to Saxon blonde. Look at all these colors. Okay, so we've got people of all shades, from blue-black to Saxon blonde, assuming that somebody who is Saxon blonde is very fair-skinned. I don't know much about Saxons. Apparently they were blonde. Gabbling and gesticulating over piles of oysters and clams and freshly caught fish of varied hue. By 10 o'clock, the sun was beating down so fiercely that the glitter of the white sandy streets dazzled and pained the eyes unaccustomed to it, and Rena was glad to be driven back to the hotel. The travelers left together on an early afternoon train. So now we've got this press of humanity in every shade, with Warwick and Rena closer to the fairest of the shades, and apparently enough fair, like I don't know, they're probably lighter skinned than some white people are, but they're fair enough that people look at them and say white, and their features and all that. But it's interesting to place them in this press of humanity of every hue, and fish of varied hue, and then the sun, which is bright and light, and we think of the sun as yellow, but when it is at its brightest and it's gleaming down, the light is white and harsh. So we have this harsh white light glittering on the white sandy streets that dazzles and pains the eyes. And then you have to go back to the hotel where it's dimmer inside. There's a whole lot going on with light and color here. All right, thus for the time being was severed the last tie that bound Rena to her narrow past, and for some time to come, the places and the people who had known her once were to know her no more. Ooh, so we know this is temporary, thus for the time being. So not forever. We're pretending like it's forever, but we know that it's not. Interesting. Some few weeks later, Miss Molly called upon old Judge Straight with reference to the taxes on her property. Your son came in to see me the other day, he remarked. He seems to have got along. Oh yes, Judge, he's doing fine, John has, and he's took his sister away with him. Ah, exclaimed the judge. Then after a pause, he added, I hope she may do as well. Thank you, sir, she said with a curtsy as she rose to go. We've always known that you were our friend and wished us well. The judge looked after her as she walked away. Her bearing had a touch of timidity, a shade of affectation, and yet a certain pathetic dignity. It is a pity, he murmured with a sigh, that men cannot select their mothers. My young friend John has builded, whether wisely or not, very well. But he has come back into the old life and carried away a part of it, and I fear that this addition will weaken the structure. I fear the same thing, Judge. He has built very well, whether or not it was wise. He made his decisions. Coming back is, it's gonna mess things up. And the judge is foreshadowing that for us. That is the end of chapter 4. This is House Behind the Cedars by, I was about to say William Wells Brown, by Charles Chesnutt. This is Reading with Rashonda, and I'm Rashonda Cade.